You ever notice how real trouble never announces itself? It just slides in quiet like it owns the place. Yeah, that morning by the lake started like any other: calm air, water, smooth birds doing their thing, and me just standing there thinking about nothing important at all. And that's usually when life decides to throw hands. This lake right here, it wasn't some random body of water. It was part of my life, part of my family history, part of who I was before anybody ever built a house around it, before HOA signs, before meetings, before rule books, before people started confusing noise with authority. I owned it, every inch of it: shoreline, water rights, bottom land, all of it legally clean, paperwork, surveys, older than half the houses sitting around it. But I never flexed that, never felt the need to walk around reminding folks what was mine, because when you actually own something you don't need to shout about it. And that's the funny part about power. Real power is quiet, fake power always loud. So there I was minding my business when I hear footsteps coming fast and heavy, like somebody walking with a purpose they borrowed from anger, and before I even turned around I already knew this wasn't gonna be a friendly hello. She had that walk, you know, the one: clipboard hugged tight, chest out, chin lifted, eyes scanning like she was already mad before she found a reason, and before I could even say morning she launched straight into it. "Excuse me, you can't be here, this is HOA property." No greeting, no question, no hesitation, just accusation. I remember blinking once, slow, like did she really just say that? I told her calmly, "Hey, you might want to double check that, because this land ain't HOA owned, never was." She laughed, not a real laugh either, more like a dismissive, breathy sound people make when they think they already won, and she said, "I know the rules, sir, and you're violating them." Right there I knew this wasn't about rules, it was about control. She kept talking faster, louder, stacking words on top of each other, talking about trespassing, fines, enforcement, calling the board, all that HOA language they love using because it sounds official even
This is
when
the
it's
area
empty.
we need to focus on right now.
I
Are
tried
you sure
again,
about this
calm,
location?
steady, telling
Yes,
her
it's
this
marked
lake
right here.
belonged to me, that I had documents, surveys, everything, and she didn't even slow down, didn't even let me finish a sentence. People like her don't listen, they wait for their turn to speak. Then she said the magic words, the ones that always tell you exactly who you're dealing with. "I'm calling the cops." And she said it with a smile. Like she was excited. Like she couldn't wait to see me put in my place. That's when the hook really set, because see, I wasn't scared, not even a little. I already knew how this ended, I just didn't know how loud it was gonna get. She stepped back, dialing, already talking to dispatch, pointing at me like I was some criminal mastermind trespassing on her precious rules, and I just stood there letting it happen, because sometimes the fastest way to truth is letting a liar finish talking. Sirens didn't take long, they never do in neighborhoods like that. Lights flashing, neighbors peeking through blinds, doors cracking open, phones already out, because
You have to
folks
listen to
love
me.
drama more
This is
than
not a
facts.
drill. We have to move now.
The cops pulled up, professional, calm, neutral, and she rushed them, immediately cutting me off mid-breath, telling her story fast, loud, emotional, leaving out anything that didn't fit her version. HOA property, she said, refusing to leave, she said trespassing, she said hostile. Hostile. I almost laughed. The officer finally looked at me, asked me calmly what was going on, and I told him exactly what I told her, that this was my land, that the HOA had no claim here, that I had documentation and surveys, and he nodded like, "Okay, let's see it." That's when things started shifting. I pulled out copies, clean, organized,
This is not the
ready,
right
because
area.
when
You're
you
looking at the
actually
wrong
own
map.
something,
Are you
stay
certain?
ready, you don't scramble. As the officer started reading, the other one walked the shoreline, checking markers, comparing maps, and I could feel the energy changing, slow but sure. Her voice got louder. She kept interrupting. Kept saying that can't be right, that she's been here for years, that the HOA manages the lake. Manages. That word right there gets people in trouble. Because managing don't mean owning, and the law don't care how long you've been loud, it cares who got proof. Neighbors started gathering closer, whispering, phones recording, and I could see the realization creeping across faces.
We cannot wait any longer. This is
whole
our moment to
story
act,
for years.
and we
Nobody
must do
ever
it now.
questioned it. Until now. The officer looked up at her, asked her if she had any documentation proving HOA ownership, and she froze just for a second, and in that second everything cracked. She said, "The board has it." The officer said, "Then you don't." And that hit harder than any insult. She tried to recover, tried to talk over him, tried to say she was authorized, that she was enforcing community rules, but authority without ownership don't mean much when property law enters the room. The officer turned to me and said, "Sir, from what I'm seeing here, this appears to be your property." And that sentence changed everything. You could hear it, the crowd reacted, the whispers turned louder, phones zoomed in, and she went pale. She started backpedaling, saying there must be a mistake, saying she's calling the board, saying this will be corrected, but the damage was done. Because once authority gets checked publicly, it never fully recovers. The officers told her there was no trespassing, no violation, no reason for police presence.
You have to do
and
something
suggested
right now.
everyone go
It's
their
not
separate
safe.
ways. She didn't like that.
You have to believe me, officer.
one
Ma'am,
bit.
calm down and explain.
I can't.
She
It's
stood
happening
there stunned,
now.
watching the cops leave, watching neighbors stare, watching her power evaporate in real time, and she shot me a look full of disbelief, like she couldn't understand how reality didn't bend for her. And I remember thinking, this ain't over.
Pretty.
Because people like that never let go easy. She didn't say another word, just stood there staring like her whole world tilted sideways, and she wasn't sure which way was up anymore. And when she finally turned around and walked off, I could feel every eye on me, neighbors, cops, even the birds went quiet.
Everyone, we
for a
must focus
second.
here. The data on these maps
And
confirms
that's when I
everything.
knew
We
this
can't afford any
wasn't just
mistakes
some
now.
random argument by the water. This was the start of something bigger, something that had been brewing under the surface for years. Because see, when fake authority gets exposed, it don't disappear, it gets angry. The rest of that day felt heavy, like the air itself knew something had shifted. Neighbors kept walking by, pretending they just happened to be outside, but really they were curious. They wanted to know what just happened, what they just witnessed. A couple folks nodded at me. One older guy gave me a thumbs up, real subtle, like he didn't want anyone noticing, but he wanted me to know he saw it. By that evening, my phone started
We are here
buzzing
today to
messages
address
from
the
people
concerns
I
of our
barely
community
talked to,
and
saying
move
things
forward
like,
with
"Hey,
resolve."
heard about what happened today," or "Wow,
We
didn't
appreciate
know
the
lake
community's
wasn't
support
HOA
during this
owned,"
challenging
or,
time.
"Man, she's
Moving
been
forward,
acting like that
transparency
for
will be our top
years."
priority.
That's when it hit me. This wasn't the first time she tried to flex
This
power.
can't be
This was
happening.
just the first
We
time
have to do
someone
something
didn't fold.
now.
I know, but how?
Later that night,
can't believe
got
you would
an
say that.
email
It's
from
the truth,
HOA
and you
board,
know it.
real
Please,
polite,
both
real
of you, stop
careful
this.
language,
No, we have
saying
to
there
face
had been
this
an
now.
unfortunate misunderstanding, and they wanted to set up a meeting to discuss community harmony. Community harmony. That's HOA speak for let's try to control the narrative. I didn't respond right away. I wanted them sitting in that discomfort a little longer, because discomfort is where truth grows. Next morning I went back to the lake early, real early, sunrise barely breaking water smooth like glass, and I stood there thinking about how crazy it is how land can outlast people, outlast rules, outlast ego. This lake didn't care who yelled yesterday, it didn't care who was embarrassed, it just existed, calm, steady, unbothered. Around mid-morning she showed up again. This time not loud, not confident, not marching. This time hesitant.
You don't have guns! You can't hide
She
anymore!
stayed back a few feet,
Everyone
arms crossed,
knows
no
the truth.
clipboard, no phone, just staring like she was trying to figure out what angle to take next. She finally spoke, saying the board would be reviewing the matter, and until then she expected no further activity. Expected. I told her calmly that expectations don't override ownership, and she didn't argue, she just nodded, tight jaw turned, and left. That silence told me everything. By afternoon the videos started popping up. Neighbors had uploaded clips of the police interaction, the shoreline argument, her pointing, yelling, claiming ownership, and then the moment when the officer said it appears to be your property. That clip spread fast. Group chats, Facebook pages, local forums, even Reddit. People love watching fake authority crumble. Comments poured in calling out HOA abuse, sharing stories, laughing, shaking their heads. And with every share her power shrank. That night another email came from the HOA, this time more urgent, asking for documentation, asking for clarification, asking to avoid escalation. Avoid escalation. Too late. Because once the truth hits the public, escalation happens whether you want it or not. I sent one reply, short, clean, attached copies of deeds, surveys, county records, and a single line saying this matter is closed. No threats, no insults, just facts. That's when things got real quiet for a few days. Too quiet. Because when bullies go quiet, they usually planning something. I heard from a neighbor that the board held an emergency meeting, closed doors, no notice, no minutes, and that's never a good sign.
He's clearly avoiding the question.
Then came the letter. Certified mail, HOA letterhead, legal language accusing me of disrupting community peace, threatening fines, legal action, enforcement measures. I laughed out loud when I read it. Because see, they still thought noise was power. They still thought letters could scare someone who actually owns what they're pretending to control. I handed that letter straight to my attorney. And that's when the chess game started. My lawyer smiled when he read it, that kind of smile you only see when someone else messed up bad and doesn't realize it yet. He said they just put everything in writing. That's gold. He drafted a response, not emotional, not aggressive, just precise, outlining ownership, boundaries, harassment, false police involvement, potential liability. And that response landed like a brick. Because once lawyers get involved, fake authority melts fast. Phones started ringing again, emails flying back and forth, HOA boards suddenly very respectful, very careful about wording. And her. She went silent. Neighbors said she stopped coming outside, stopped walking the lake, stopped attending events. People started whispering, saying she might resign, saying the board was mad at her, saying she went too far. And deep down I knew this was just the first act. Because once systems get exposed, they either reform or collapse. And this one had been rotten a long time. After that letter went out, things didn't calm down like the HOA hoped. Nah, it did the opposite, because once you shine light on fake authority, all the roaches start running, and that's exactly what happened. People started talking openly now, neighbors who barely made eye contact before suddenly stopping me, asking questions, wanting details, wanting to know how long I owned the lake, what the HOA really controlled, what they had been lied to about. And I kept it simple. I didn't hype it, didn't brag, I just told the truth, because the truth don't need seasoning. The board tried damage control, sending out emails reminding everyone about community values, respect, cooperation, harmony, all those soft words they use when they scared, but none of it stuck because folks had already seen behind the curtain. They had watched the video, they had heard the officer, they knew the HOA didn't own what it claimed. And when that realization hits, people stop fearing letters. Then one afternoon I saw her again. Not by the lake, not in public, but in the parking lot by the mailbox. She looked smaller somehow, shoulders tight, eyes darting around like she was waiting for someone to record her, and when she saw me she froze. I didn't say anything, just nodded and kept walking. That silence hit harder than any argument because bullies feed on reaction, and I wasn't giving her a drop. Later that week my lawyer called, said we needed to talk because the HOA had crossed another line. Turns out they had sent notices to multiple homeowners warning them not to access the lake, claiming liability issues even though they had zero authority to restrict it. That move right there changed the game. Because now it wasn't just harassment, it was interference. And courts don't play about that. My lawyer laid it out clean: cease and desist letters, lawsuits, damages, and suddenly this little neighborhood drama was sitting in real legal territory. The HOA lawyer tried to spin it, tried to say confusion, misunderstanding, miscommunication, but confusion don't justify false authority. Documents were stacked, timelines built, and every email they sent only buried them deeper. Meanwhile, the internet was still eating the story up. Local news picked it up, framed it as HOA overreach, neighbor stands ground, clips replayed, commentary rolling. People across the country chiming in saying, yeah, my HOA tried that, or I wish I stood up like that, or this is why HOAs need limits. And the board felt it. Meetings got heated, shouting matches, resignations, whispered rumors flying that insurance wouldn't cover intentional misconduct. That's when fear really set in. Because once personal liability enters the chat, everybody gets real quiet real quick. She tried to speak at one meeting. Neighbors said her voice shook. No confidence, no fire, just defensiveness. And when someone asked why she called the cops without proof, she had no answer. That silence was loud. After that, she stopped showing up altogether. The board announced they were reviewing leadership roles, policies, enforcement boundaries, all that corporate cleanup language, but everyone knew what it really was. Panic. My lawyer filed formally harassment, false reporting, interference with property rights. And once that paperwork hit the county, everything slowed down like the air got thick. Because lawsuits make things real. Neighbors took sides, some quiet, some vocal, but nobody defended her openly, not anymore. Too many receipts, too many witnesses. Court dates scheduled, depositions looming, and suddenly the woman who once ruled the shoreline couldn't even step outside without eyes following. And through all of it I stayed calm. Went to the lake early mornings, walked the shore, let the water remind me why none of this noise mattered. Because land doesn't panic. Truth doesn't rush. And time always favors the patient. And the news kept coming in like a slow tide. People sharing stories about the HOA past behavior, fines, selective enforcement letters, threats, and the pattern became obvious even to casual neighbors. The whole system had been exploiting fear, and now fear didn't stick anymore because the truth was out loud and clear. Meetings turned into shouting matches, board members pointing fingers, resignations flying through email, resignations posted officially, social media buzzing, neighbors talking about how quickly things were unraveling. One board member actually disappeared overnight, sold his house, left town, nobody knew where he went, and the rest started squabbling like kids caught in the act. And me, I stayed quiet, mostly just observing, letting it unfold like a slow movie, because once authority is exposed it becomes predictable in all the wrong ways for them. She tried again though, she emailed the local newspaper trying to spin her version, calling me aggressive, saying I harassed her. The cops were called multiple times. And the reporter laughed at that because the police report told a different story, every single line of it contradicting her narrative. Then came the emails from neighbors confirming they had seen her threaten other homeowners about access to the lake, trying to enforce rules that didn't exist. Each email another brick in the wall of reality closing in on her. The community started shifting, everyone talking about accountability, what had been done to them over the years, how the HOA misused power, and who really owned the lake. And that's when the class action started forming quietly, at first just conversations, text messages, people reaching out wanting to know if anyone else had similar experiences. The momentum grew fast. One meeting at a neighbor's house led to another group chat, another email thread. Within weeks, everyone who had stayed quiet started sharing proof stories, documentation, emails, even photos. The HOA tried backpedaling, saying, "Oh, we are sorry, oh miscommunication, oh new policies," but it was too late. Because momentum like that, once it starts, it don't stop. By the time depositions began, the woman who called the cops was a shadow of her former swagger, voice shaky in the witness stand, not loud, confident, not sure what to say, and every question hit hard because the truth was stacking high and nobody could spin it anymore. And the internet kept buzzing, clips from the confrontation circulating, people across the country commenting, saying, "Oh yeah, this happens in my neighborhood too," or "Wow, finally someone stood up." That coverage put pressure on the board, external pressure from media, internal pressure from lawsuits, and the legal fees rising faster than they could imagine. Insurance companies started reviewing coverage only to find intentional misconduct voided any claim, leaving them personally liable for actions they thought were protected. And then the notice arrived, the real one, the cease and desist letter, drafted perfectly, laying out harassment, intentional false reporting, interference with property rights, liability, damages, financial penalties. That letter landed like a thunderbolt, because now this wasn't just a discussion, this wasn't just a confrontation, this was real legal consequences. Neighbors watched the board meetings now with sharp eyes, not naive anymore. They asked hard questions, demanded transparency, accountability, and the HOA tried to answer, but they had no foundation, only excuses. And every excuse was another hole in their credibility. And me, meanwhile, I stayed calm, visiting the lake early mornings, watching the sun break over the water, listening to the wind, and realizing nothing in that chaos could touch the calm of ownership. People started coming up to me asking for advice, how to stand up, how to document evidence, how to deal with bullies in positions of fake power. I shared what I knew, just straightforward, calm advice, because sharing truth only makes it stronger. The woman tried one last time to intervene, saying new rules had been passed restricting access. I laughed out loud when I saw the letters posted. Nobody cared. They knew she had no authority. She knew she had no authority, and that knowledge is heavier than any yell. Court day approached, tensions high, everyone waiting, watching, legal teams lining up, deposition schedules tight, every move documented, every statement on record, and the woman realizing the game was bigger than her and she couldn't spin it anymore. Neighbors showing up, witnesses lined up, proof stacked high, videos, photos, emails, all clear and clean, every contradiction of her story exposed. And finally, after months of tension, preparation, testimony, review, arguments, everything came down to the judge reading the findings. Ownership confirmed harassment, confirmed interference with property rights, confirmed misuse of authority, and the consequences were clear. She couldn't even look up, standing there knowing she had been exposed fully, legally, publicly, and privately. The board finally admitted they overreached, policies rewritten, leadership shaken, financial liability real, and immediate clear warnings about crossing lines again and consequences if they tried. And just like that, the fear that had held the neighborhood for years evaporated. Silence fell, not tense, not awkward, just calm, because everybody understood what had happened. And me, I went back to the lake, early morning water smooth like glass, reflection perfect, and thought about how slow patience wins, how truth always rises, and how even fake authority crumbles when it meets undeniable reality. The court dates came and it felt heavy, like the air itself knew something was about to shift, the entire neighborhood buzzing, quiet tension. You could hear it in the way people moved, the way neighbors exchanged glances, knowing finally justice was gonna speak. I remember walking to the courthouse early morning, water still glassy in my mind, thinking about how far we came, how long we let people lie, how long we tolerated fear, and now that moment was here. Inside the courtroom, cameras off, phones silent, everyone focused, papers stacked, attorneys shuffling the case ready to unfold. The HOA representatives sat stiff, smiles, tight eyes darting like they hoped no one would notice the evidence piling up against them, and the woman who once called the cops full swagger now barely lifting her head, looking like a ghost of confidence past. The judge called the room to order, voice firm, clear, everyone straightening in their seats, anticipation thick enough to taste. First witnesses came up, neighbors sharing experiences, stories about harassment, emails, threats, limitations on property they never had power over, statements careful, truthful, direct, showing patterns, months if not years of misconduct, and the crowd leaning in, listening, nodding, absorbing every word. My lawyer stood beside me, calm, steady, reminding me to breathe slow, keep focus, because truth already won before we even spoke. Then it was my turn. I walked up, slow, hands empty, just calm presence, telling my story straightforward, no embellishments, just facts, recounting the lake, the confrontation, the cops, the letters, the harassment, the interference, letting it all unfold naturally. Every statement met with nods, judges' eyes, attentive reporters taking notes, and the woman squirming like heat from a fire burning unseen. Attorneys from both sides questioning witnesses, countering arguments. I just stayed focused, letting everything fall into place, every lie exposed, every contradiction highlighted naturally by the rhythm of truth. And the internet coverage kept pace, local blogs, national forums breaking down every detail, social media buzzing, clips replayed, commentary growing, viral awareness. The story no longer just about one lake, about one woman, about one HOA, but a pattern, people across the country recognizing themselves in it. And the woman trying one last desperate attempt, her voice trembling, claiming misunderstanding, misremembering, asserting authority she had never held, lawyers shaking heads, gently correcting every inaccuracy one by one, showing the documents proving property ownership, the surveys proving control, the records proving nothing she said had merit. The judge listening patiently, slowly outlining findings, reiterating ownership, harassment, interference, exposure to false claims, all stacked together, weighing heavily on the HOA representatives in the room. By the end of the day, every single board member looking worn thin, the woman looking defeated, and me feeling calm satisfaction, knowing truth had finally been heard and acknowledged, without yelling, without threats, without drama, just facts. Outside the courthouse, the neighbors gathered, congratulating each other, sharing relief stories, lessons learned, some hugging, some laughing, some shaking their heads at how long it took to arrive here. And I walked down to the lake afterward, early evening water reflecting pink and orange sky, thinking about patience and perseverance, and how long authority can seem untouchable until someone stands firm and refuses to be silenced. Emails started coming in from other neighborhoods, people sharing their own horror stories about HOA harassment, asking advice, asking how to stand up, how to gather proof, how to navigate the legal maze. And that's when I realized this lake fight had become bigger than just one property, bigger than just one confrontation, bigger than just one woman who called the cops. It had turned into a movement, awareness, teaching, standing up, refusing to accept false authority, showing people that even small voices backed by truth could topple bullies. The HOA tried quietly at first to appeal to some sympathetic neighbors, hoping to regain control, but the court ruling made clear consequences for any continued interference, clear warning letters, real accountability, and suddenly the fear they wielded for years evaporated like mist in morning sun. The woman who once strutted down the shoreline now avoided eye contact wherever she went, no swagger, no confidence, no way to claim moral high ground. She had been publicly exposed, legally and socially simultaneously. And the neighborhood slowly settled back into a rhythm of calm, quiet normalcy, the lake free from false claims, the board cautious, careful, now aware of real limitations, the neighbors empowered and informed. I often go down there mornings, water flat, mirror calm, deep inhale, thinking about how close it came, how easy it would have been to let fear dictate behavior, how loud lies almost convinced me to fold, but I didn't, and now the lake stands as proof that truth, patience, and persistence always win. Kids running laughing around the shoreline, families setting up small picnics, community gatherings returning quietly as people realized that space was theirs too, the water no longer contested, no longer tension, no longer dominated by fake authority. Even the birds seemed to recognize it, flying low, gliding peacefully as if acknowledging that calm had returned, that chaos had been quelled, that rightful order had been restored. And sometimes late at night when the wind whispers through the trees over the water, I reflect on how authority works, how fear is temporary, and how facts backed by law, backed by proof, backed by persistence will always outlast noise. This fight was never about winning an argument or embarrassing someone. It was about standing firm on what is rightfully yours, knowing your ground, knowing your limits, knowing when to speak and when to let evidence do the talking. Because at the end of the day, loud don't mean right, authority don't mean ownership, and persistence, patience, and truth always carry the day. After the ruling, everything started to settle in a way that felt surreal. Neighbors coming up quietly, sharing relief stories, saying finally nobody can mess with the lake anymore. Families walking along the shoreline, kids laughing, adults smiling quietly, knowing they had witnessed something rare, a real change, a real victory that wasn't just for me but for everyone who had been bullied by the HOA for years. Even the local news kept following the story, publishing updates, articles, interviews with neighbors who had finally felt safe enough to speak about harassment, intimidation, unfair fines, restrictions that had plagued them for decades. The woman who once marched down the shoreline pointing, accusing, yelling, calling cops, she disappeared, mostly kept to herself, avoided community gatherings, avoided eye contact wherever she went, and her absence felt like proof enough of what happens when fake authority gets exposed fully, legally and socially simultaneously. The HOA board meetings became tense places, real discussions about limits, transparency, accountability, and legal compliance replaced shouting and bullying, and for the first time in years the neighbors had real influence over policies, discussions, decisions, no longer empty rhetoric or threats, only clear rules everyone could see and verify. I spent mornings walking the shoreline, reflecting, thinking about how fast things can change when someone stands their ground, knowing what they own, knowing when to push and when to stay calm, letting the law do its work, letting the facts speak louder than anger, louder than threats, louder than bluster. And people watched. They saw patience in motion, they saw calm win over chaos, they saw the lake return to peace. Emails started coming in from other communities, people sharing their own stories, asking for advice, how to deal with HOAs who overreach, asking how to stay calm, how to collect proof, how to navigate legal processes, how to protect themselves, knowing that this small lake fight had become an example, a lesson, a warning to anyone trying to abuse authority. The woman never recovered socially, her credibility destroyed, legally exposed, her power gone, replaced by fear, recognition that her actions had consequences, that authority isn't something you invent on a clipboard, it's something earned by law, facts, and proof, and she had none. I remember one morning sitting at the shoreline watching the reflection of the sunrise on water, thinking about all of it, the confrontation, the cops, the letters, the court, the community, watching how fast the tide of power shifted when truth hit, and how calm observation, patience, persistence made it all possible. Neighbors began enjoying the lake again, the kids running freely, families setting up small picnics, people kayaking, fishing, swimming without fear, everyone understanding that control had returned to rightful ownership. The calm that comes from knowing the truth is recognized and upheld. Evenings were quiet, peaceful, people gathered, sometimes telling stories about how they almost didn't speak up, how fear almost kept them silent, and how one calm, steadfast person willing to assert facts changed the entire dynamic permanently, showing that power backed by noise and ego is temporary, but truth backed by proof is eternal. Attorneys confirmed no further action could be taken against me or any neighbor. Access remained unrestricted. The HOA legally and publicly acknowledged limits, responsibilities, and boundaries never before respected. I walked the shoreline thinking about lessons learned about life, about authority, about patience and persistence, about how easy it is to assume someone has more power than they do, and how dangerous it is to believe fear can dictate reality. Sometimes in the evenings I hear the wind whispering through the trees above the lake, the birds landing quietly, gliding low across the water, and I realize this is what victory feels like: calm, steady, quiet, enduring, because it was built on facts, not noise, built on proof, not threats, built on patience, not anger. I reflect on how often people underestimate the importance of documenting truth, of standing calm when confronted with loud lies, how often people let authority go unchecked just because it seems overwhelming, and how important it is to remember that patience, observation, persistence backed by evidence will always shift the balance eventually. Neighbors started volunteering for community cleanups, small events, enjoying the lake together, sharing stories, laughs, smiles, and for the first time in years the community felt like a real community, not a collection of people afraid to speak. And the woman who once called the cops, she faded quietly into obscurity, nobody defending her, nobody following her every move. She had nothing left, credibility destroyed, presence diminished, authority nullified, and all of that happened because one person calmly asserted truth, patiently persisted, and refused to let fear dictate behavior. And I walk the shoreline mornings, late evenings, reflections on water, smooth glass, calm, clear, thinking about how easy it would have been to give in to fear, to let noise intimidate, to let ego bully me into silence, but I didn't, and now the lake stands calm, reflective, proof of what truth, patience, and persistence can do when paired with ownership and facts. Neighbors come up asking questions, sharing stories, learning how to protect themselves, learning how to stand firm, learning that no matter how loud a bully gets, if you know your ground, if you have evidence, if you have calm patience, truth will always find its way. I watch the water ripple, small waves breaking softly against the shore, thinking about how fragile fake power is, how strong calm steady truth is, how loud claims mean nothing if they aren't backed by fact, and how this lake fight became bigger than just one confrontation. It became a symbol, a lesson, a story people talk about across communities, online and offline. Sometimes late at night I sit on the dock listening to the wind rustling through the trees, reflecting on everything from confrontation to court to community healing, thinking about how fast the tide of authority can turn when someone simply stands firm and refuses to be intimidated.